Hello, you're welcome. It's Henry the computer guy. Actually, today we are going to be talking about what we call a page layout or the layout. Previously, we talked about the design. So today we are talking about the layout tab, and actually we shall be talking about the margins, the orientation, the page size, then the columns. So let's begin by getting some information into our document. Let's say we need some dummy text there. I can say equals rand into, let's say, 5,6, then enter. So this is the information we're having. Let's put it into Times New Roman. So that's the information we're having for our document. So now we come back to our page layout or layout. Let's begin with what we call the margins. So at times you're given some information and you're provided with some dimensions which you're supposed to include into your document or make some modifications. So margins are specifically going to help us to align our text or information relative to the beginning of the line of what? Of the margins here. So now let's click onto the margins. Here we have what we call the narrow. There are many items here. We might be given a question, then we are required to put the top margins, the left, the bottom, the right, and others. So what we do, we just come to our margins here, and we come to what we call the custom margins. So we include in the values that we have been provided with. So actually here we have the top margins, we have the left, we have the right, we have the right. So now when we look at this information here, it is having these quotes. So that means that they are always in, or these ones we're having are always in inches. But you might find a question when it requires you to change the dimensions. For example, these are specifically representing inches. Now you might be having a question, but they require you to change the dimension. So what we do, we come to what we call file, we come to the options, then we come to what we call advanced and look for what we call the display. When we come to the display, it is here. So we specifically show the measurements or the measurements in units of. So this is where we can change the units from. Then afterwards, you put the margins the way they have given them to you. Specifically, that's how we can change them. So by default here we are having inches, but we can put centimeters, millimeters, and others. That's how we can change them in case the question has given you different margins. So assuming that we have highlighted our work here and they have told us that we are going to put margins, let's say we put 2 here or any, just assuming. So we are seeing the preview down here. So after putting, we say, okay, that's how our margins have been put. So they have been including different measurements as we have actually clicked onto them. Are we together? So in most cases, you're given a question, putting the top margin, left margin, bottom, and right. But down here we have something else, which is referred to as the gutter. What is the meaning of the gutter? Gutter specifically is that term used to designate an additional margin added to a page layout to compensate for the part of the of the paper made usable by the binding process. Assuming that you're going to make a book or you want to bind your book, so that means that we shall apply that one to what we call the gutter. Specifically that space that is going to be left there for the binding process. So it can be applied to the left or at the top. Now, assuming that we increase it here, you're going to see a side here in the preview that it's going to be leaving that part where you'll be putting the spirals or the binding or the holes for that will be used when you're binding your work. So if it is not talked about, of course, you can apply it to the top or you can put it at the left. So of course, if it is not talked about, you can leave it to or raise that 0. Are we together? That's how we can put our margins onto our information or into the document that we are really having. That is specifically about the margin. Now, the second is what we call the orientation. How is the page displayed? Is it in this portrait or landscape? We can change. Now by default we are having it as a portrait, but we can change it to a landscape, whereby it is wider than it is long. Under orientation portrait, it is taller than it is wide. Those are the two types of orientation that we are having. So a question may ask you to either put your document or information in portrait or landscape. So under portrait orientation, the page is always taller than it is wide, and under landscape, it is always wider than it is tall. Then let's go to what we call the page sizes. So they can always tell you to pick the sizes of the page that you're having. So we are having this one as this information. So we can change this information to all sizes. We can put it to A4. We can put it to letter. We can put it many of them A3. So, but by default, when we are printing, the printer will always select size A4, unless otherwise that you have changed the size. But by default, it will always take what we call the A4. So this is where we can choose the sizes of our pages. Any of them we can say letter, A4, what and what. So you can also give them the sizes, width and the height. That is specifically the page size. Then when we come to this of the number of the columns, we can have this information and they tell us that, let's say we are going to have paragraph 2 and let's say 3 into 2 columns. So we come here, we can come to more columns, then we apply the number of columns they have asked us. That is it specifically. But there, when we come here, they can also add you some other information. For example, they can tell you the width is supposed to be this, the spacing is supposed to be this, or include a line between that information that you have been putting in that you have been putting in the columns. Are we together? So this is how we can specifically use the margins, the page orientation, the page size, and the columns. Thank you for watching. All this has been about the page setup. See you again in the next video.